and actually quite amazing to me.
In fact, I think it'd be fair to describe them as vicious.
Well, I think our family is very surprised.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that, because the fact of the matter is that if you look at the composition of the board at the moment, ASL, for instance, is not represented on the board. And the majority of the members of the board are members of the Correia group. I think it's important to explain how that came about.
Okay, well, I mean, Mazar was a board member until last year, but I would say that...
Well, how was the board elected?
The board is elected at an annual general meeting. This is how it's done in private sectors. And every member...
By the shareholders?
By the shareholders, and every member has a vote. And they can nominate and elect who they please. They need to nominate and elect people that they have confidence that will represent their interests. That is how a board works. Now, I mean, it's quite clear that Air Services' level of interest in the development of the airport over the years has declined considerably. I mean, they never invested any money. They were always very concerned about their own operations. So it's not surprising to me. Mazar himself did not attend all board meetings. Sometimes he never used to turn up. So he's had very little interest. So it's not surprising to me to see that the actual shareholders themselves would choose to have somebody else represent them.
Well, in their press conference, ASL emphasized that they say, the largest operator in the country. You can comment on that if you wish, but I think more important, and what I'd like you to comment on, the fact is they're by no means the largest investor in the development of the airport, are they?
No, Air Services have a lot of aircraft. I think I've pointed out publicly before that TransGuyana and the other operators, I think, in the past roughly had about 60 to 65% of the business, in spite of the fact that Air Services have a lot of aircraft. Of course, these dynamics change all the time, but it is, the reality of the situation is that I think that they have a little over 10% investment in the airport. So while they're a large operator, they do not have a large investment in the airport.
Would you have any objection to their representation on the board?
Well, I think that every AGM, the situation changes. You have 12 shareholders now, so I think we have a democracy. We feel very strongly about our democracy. What I can promise you is that the Correia Group have not exercised their shareholding majority in elections.
What is that majority?
It's roughly about 60% at this time. Shareholding majority. But we actually are only 3 of the 12 investors. We have 3 members of the Correia Group of companies that have invested. Remember, I mentioned to you that when TransGuyana could not invest any further, we had to turn to other sources to try and find funding to develop the airport. So you have 3 out of 12 at the next AGM. And I think that the other shareholders who are also non-operators, remember some of these people have actually invested their money in the hope of not gaining facilities for the development of their own operations, but in the hope of a return on their investment in the future. So I think we need to take that into consideration when we're talking about this issue.
So your company has invested about 60% of the investment in the
Correia Group,
yes,
through three of their companies.
So you certainly borne the major burden of it. What would have happened if you hadn't?
Well, you could probably ask Tony that. Tony
that is the problem. The problem is
come on, Come in, Tony.
The problem is that we have a mandated minimum requirement for the development of the airport.
No, this is in the agreement with
In
the
the
government.
agreement with the government.
Let's talk about that.
If we did not have the funding to do it, we would have been in violation of that mandatory requirement, and we may have lost the airport. The airport may have gone back. So there's no question of without the funding, the airport would have been in trouble.
And also, don't forget that one of the reasons why we had to do this is so that we wouldn't have to be relocated to Temeri. So our investment in the airport is not only for Trans-Guyana as an operator, but basically benefits all the operators.
So at that point in time, your company came in with the additional funding, and you've widened the shareholding now.
The shareholding is widened because obviously our companies cannot take the full burden of the investment. The airport investment, bringing an airport, a small airport to international standards is a very expensive business kit. So we have to widen it.
Anet Arjun also seemed to have totally misrepresented the facts of the shareholding in her, and I'd like you to comment on this, in her press conference. She said that the government has a major investment in the airport. That's not correct.
No, that's not correct, Kit. As I had mentioned before, this was a privatization option that the government considered. The president, because of that, I think was not comfortable with granting it to a private consortium. So we do have an agreement with the government, though, that at the end of phase 2, that if they wish, they could exercise an option to become involved. And I think that's a very important point, Kit, that the airport themselves, it is not true to say that the airport themselves do not want to have